Yep, we are live. Good evening. Aloha, everybody.
Aloha. What's happening, Charles?
Nothing much. It's a beautiful Monday evening. Yeah, a little bit under the weather, but other than that, it's A-OK, man. A-OK.
Right on, man. Right on, right on. Well, as you can see, my new environment in the man
Yeah.
cave because my neighbor has decided to go grind something with his compressor tonight. So I'm locked up in the man cave for tonight, and we got an amazing show tonight, everybody. I know a lot of people. First of all, welcome, and don't forget, please share this if you have an opportunity. Because I'm in my man cave, I don't have my little share thing, but there you go. Please share this because we've been getting a lot of questions about the schools and the DOE and all of that, and I just wanted to make sure you let everybody know if you're watching right now and you have friends or family that are concerned about the DOE or have questions, please, now is the time to share it. They'll be coming on. We got Paul Zina, the district superintendent for Kauai. We have Marnie Ohye and Danielle Du. They're part of the state's Keiki nursing, Keiki nursing program, and they'll be on as well. So we're focusing on being safe in schools, making sure our kids are safe, our teachers are safe, our staff, all of our personnel that works at the DOE
Hmm.
are safe. So we really want you guys to share this. We want you guys to make sure that everybody knows that it's on. And of course, if you have any questions, shoot Charlie or myself a message. I'm a little not really set up right now but I do have my phone, so I'll be checking the comments. And if you guys have any questions, just go ahead and shoot it over, and then we'll make sure that we get it done. We get it done. So anyway, how was your day, Charles? How was your day? I just want to make sure that we're actually on.
Yes, it looks like we're on. We're
Oh,
doing,
okay.
yep.
Yeah. Okay, we are. Perfect. Perfect. Oop. No, sorry. Sorry. All right. Got it. Got it. Okay, dokie. So, how was your day? I'm sorry, Charlie. How was your day again?
Yeah, it was pretty good. Pretty good. Just, I got this sinus thing bothering me, but eh, no pain, no gain, right? As they say.
That's
So,
that's it, man. You gotta rough it sometimes. Gotta rough it.
yep.
So I like there's the questions are flowing in. Why is the state not prioritizing getting us in the green for schools? Not sure what that means. Yeah, I remember Charlie and I are not part of the DOE, so you gotta dummy down the questions. You gotta dummy down the questions for us so we can ask. Let's see. Schools are not safe, or many of them are not. Yeah, we gotta try not to generalize because you see that's part of the problem is how the DOE didn't come out with a standardized protocol. They left it up to the complex superintendents or whatever, supervisors, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I think well, some will argue some schools are not safe. I think uh, I have heard both sides of that story, and I'm talking from parents. So it all depends. So and unfortunately, Paul is part of the Kauai district, so he can speak for Kauai, and maybe not necessarily for the rest of the state, but I'm sure it'll be an exciting and very informative discussion tonight. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I am excited.
Yep. I think I'm excited too because we a lot of times when we're doing the show, if something happens with the DOE, we'll get messages in the background, and so it's very hard for us to bring it to the forefront. But it's a lot of things that we look into, and I think a lot of it is what I'll be asking some questions pertaining to that. Not to put anybody on the spot, but just to get a some kind of understanding because as opposed to the other islands like Oahu, Maui, and the Big Island, Hawaii Island, communities on Kauai is rather spaced. I think the only area that's maybe a little congested would be Lihue, right? So you have you have Chiefess, then you go down to Wilcox, and so forth. So everything is kind of like in that general area, all the way to Hanamaulu. But then, other than that, everything is spread apart. So when there's something that's going on in the DOE, um, those community, it affects that community. It's something the community doesn't get notified, right? And they're concerned. They're concerned. So I think, maybe I think what would be interesting to notice, what can be done to be proactive to get the community involvement, because if we are trying to control this virus, all hands on deck, right? We try to
Hmm.
get everybody involved, and the only way it's not going to work is if you get those who are, I said it before, those who don't believe, or they're naysayers. You have the right to think that way, but um, don't spread the negative. And getting information out is not negative. It's really it's really how you take that information and how you want to use it. It's up to you. I mean, we're not going to tell you. We're going to try to bring as best information as we can to all of you, the viewers, and it's really up to you. We're not going to force feed anyone. Just like vaccines, we're not going to force feed you and say you gotta go take them. It's whether you want to take it or not, plain and simple.
All right. Well, we have our three of our guests in the waiting room. I did want to announce before we get started, the Garden Island Newspaper and Zonta Club of Kauai Foundation presents Christmas Fun 2020. This is from my wife, so I kind of gotta,
Hmm.
that's kind of what it is. It's a fundraiser. It's an annual partnership, and I'll explain more later. But it is between the Garden Island Newspaper and the Zonta Club, of which my wife is a member. So if you want to donate, you can donate to the Zonta Christmas Fund, www.zonta-kauai.org. You can just Google Zonta Kauai, and I'm sure the link will pop up. And or you can contact Cindy at 645-6343. I will definitely uh, get a picture of this and post it up for all of you to see. Please help if you can. All right, let's bring our guests in.
Oh, Zena, yes,
All
yes,
right,
yes,
there they are. There they are, the stars of the show. The stars of the show are here.
yes, 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 yes.
Okay, Danielle and Marnie, you need to unmute. Oh, I'm
Okay, there
telling
you
them. There we go. Oh, they could read lips, I think. How Portuguese telling them to unmute when they're muted. They don't can hear. Anyway, um, Paul, how are you, Paul?
I'm doing great, Mel. How are you guys doing?
Oh, great, great. I was beginning to worry because I couldn't hear any sounds from you guys. And Marnie, what? How do you say your last name, Marnie? Is it Ohye?
Oh, yay. Like how you would cheer at a game. Oh,
Oh,
yay.
yay. Oh, yay. All right. And Danielle, how do you pronounce your last name, Danielle?
Just like that. Do.
Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. As we said in our little dialogue, DOE always comes up. We always get a lot of questions which we cannot answer. So we're so happy and thankful for you all three of you. Again, the purpose of this show tonight is to discuss the DOE and how we keeping our Keiki and our staff and our teachers and all of them safe in the schools. That's the topic tonight. So Paul, if you want, take a little moment, introduce yourself and introduce our two other guests, please.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having us on the show. I think it's been, wow, since midsummer or so, since the last time we came in, right? And
Yeah.
boy, have things changed since then.
Oh,
So yeah,
man.
we've got a little bit that we can share with you all. So yeah, of course, I'm Paul Zina. I'm the Complex Area Superintendent for Kauai Schools. I have with me tonight both Marnie Ohye and Danielle Du, who are both Hawaii Keiki health nurses. That's their title for the DOE, and we're very fortunate to have them with us as a partnership with a program through UH, and actually they do a lot of work to help us coordinate things with the Department of Health and other nurse-like functions of the DOE. You may see them often most working with the school health aides. And lately, they've been a vital partner to the principals and other school leadership teams to help us navigate the very difficult sometimes circumstances around positive COVID test cases in the schools. Yeah. So yeah, we are here today to talk a little bit about that. So I'm looking forward to that, Mel.
Me too, man. Me too. And so are a lot of our viewers. Marnie,
Yes.
can I have your driver's license, registration, and insurance, please?
So, I came on board with Kauai Keiki in September. The money for my job was through the CARES Act. So it's a partnership through University Hawaii School of Nursing is actually my employer on Oahu. And
Oh,
then,
you're from Oahu.
well, that's who pays me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I was born on Oahu. I moved to Kauai back in 2000. I have 2 kids that go to school here. Yeah, I've been a nurse for a long time. I worked all over in the DOE. I was a sub in the health room as a health aide before. And then I've worked as a part-time teacher, kindergarten. And then I also worked as a substitute teacher before that. So I've been all over in the DOE.
Substitute teacher is tough, man. I know being a nurse is tough, but my Lord, teaching is tougher, I think.
You know, and I think teaching and even this job right now, everything has gone so electronic. Yeah, coming up with making PowerPoint presentations and the distance learning, even doing a career day I did just on a virtual, which is really hard to do when you're a nurse. Everything I have is like hands-on type of things. So switching over to do virtual things was kind of difficult. The teachers have it's a huge learning curve to do things distance.
Well, appreciate what you do. Danielle.
Hi, yeah, I'm also a registered nurse. I've been with the Kauai Keiki program for 5 years. So it's a statewide program. It's to get one advanced practice nurse into every complex area. So my job prior to COVID looked a lot different. So I was the only one here supporting all the schools with screenings and just all kinds of wellness and health protocols in the health room. So my position looks a lot different since COVID started. I'm just immersed in COVID. So I'm thankful to have Marnie. We've split up the district. So I have from Hanalei to Chiefess, and then she has south and west side all the way out to Kekaha. So that's kind of how we're doing our response for COVID cases right now, and even just like COVID consult questions and stuff.
Yeah, Mel, I got to tell you guys how grateful I am to have both of these young ladies with us, because I think it might've been a comment we made back when we first were on the show with Bill and I both, and that we were excited that the state was going to be funding some new nursing positions, and Marnie's a direct result of that. So it's one of the things that came out of this that we're super grateful for. I know the pandemic has plenty of things that we all have been suffering through and dealing with a great deal of change, but bringing on great people like Marnie and Danielle both, and in a very new way of looking at their work, has been one of the great things from it. I'm really fortunate to have these 2 ladies on our team.
Awesome. Well, I guess let's start off, Paul, with just, well, I was going to call you doctor. Yeah, let's just start off with a real quick overview of understanding that every complex is different, but maybe you can start off with an overview of obviously how the DOE was affected, how the schools were affected. I mean, a lot has changed since the last time you and Bill were on. Maybe you can just bring us up to speed real quick as far as protocols and what the DOE is doing, but at least for Kauai.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for that opportunity to kind of bring it from a little bit more of a general place. And like everybody knows, the change happened so quickly, when we were first getting into everything. So, a quick reminder, back when we first started the school year, we weren't even sure if anyone was going to come back to school, right, at all. And then we slowly were able to bring more and more students back to in person with a lot of different, really carefully phased in approaches, right? There was that little scare where we were worried about being 100% distance learning for the whole school year. And there was a lot of nervous tension and anxiety around that. And I think, and I really do want to credit the county team that the mayor's leading for the many different turns we took to kind of manage all of this. But ultimately, it did lead to Kauai having very good numbers for COVID-related cases and the infection rates. Recently, there was a little bit of a spike in that. And of course, that has an impact on some planning. I'll be able to give you guys the first publicly announceable pieces of information about how the third quarter is going to look, because I did just get on the mayor's daily update today. Some of you may have actually watched that already and seen some of that news. But before I get to that, rewind a little bit back to the beginning of the school year and talk about how we were really at the point in August when we were getting ready to open the school year to begin defining really clear health and safety guidelines that were at the very best vague at the time. I'll be the first to admit that. And it was because we were trying to write this rule book for a set of safety rules and regulations and guidelines that nobody really had yet. Everybody was trying to listen to the CDC and take their guidance and turn it into something really useful in the school settings around the country. And Kauai was no different than the rest of the world. We were trying to craft that and open and run school all at the same time, kind of like, build the ship and sail it at the same time is what it really felt like. And I remember us using that analogy back then. So it really has come to a place where there's been a little bit more future thinking in the planning. I think we're starting to get a little bit ahead of it. And clearly the schools are doing a drop-down fantastic job with implementing all the mitigating strategies that we had back then in August began introducing to the schools. All the different circumstances around how that health and safety guidance manual that's currently, I think, in its 11th version since August, like that should tell us right there how many changes have come and how quickly they came, right? The biggest overview I can give you is this: at the current state we're in, something without actually going back into things that I know everybody already knows in terms of the blended models, the in-person models, the distance learning models, we essentially have the same choices available to people to offer them a sense of health and safety that is best and most customized for their own families. So the one thing that hasn't left us is the ability for families to choose 100% distance learning for those who still feel like that's the safest model for them. Given all the rest of the protocols we've learned and refined over these past months, namely how to respond to a positive case in a school, we're very fortunate that we haven't had a lot of them, but we've had just enough in the schools to know that our schools are just doing a great job with it. And it's not a place where the spread continues. School is a place where the spread stops. It's what we're learning very quickly because the teachers and the staff at the schools are doing such a good job with that. We're super happy about that. And plus, these two ladies have been really instrumental in us facilitating that whole process when we do get notified of a positive case. Okay, so that brings me kind of to the general safety protocols that I'd like to just share about where we're at now. As we move into the third quarter, as we discussed back at the beginning of the second quarter and just prior to that, we were starting a phased-in approach for more and more in-person learning. And we're very fortunate that we've maintained the numbers we need to continue that. So in the third quarter, we're actually going to be building in that blended learning model, not just elementary, but now all schools, pre-K all the way up through grade 12, are going to be experiencing whatever capacity their school can hold while maintaining 6-foot distancing. That's still a CDC recommendation that's in place. And it's a really sound safety measure that everybody agrees has been a very great protective measure in all the settings around our island, and school is no different. So it's good news that we're going to be able to increase that. And it's even better news that all the principals of all the schools, K to 12, have agreed to make sure that they fill their school to capacity given that 6-foot social distancing. So that means it might look a little different from school to school based on the facility size and the numbers of students, right? But essentially we're talking about that AB or ABC, maybe even an ABCD type of model, depending on the size of the school. So that'll start in the third quarter, right at the beginning of the second semester. Very excited about that. But something that I know isn't something that the public at large gets to hear about very often is the nature of how we do a pandemic-related positive case response in a school. That can be something that is a little anxiety-filled. It creates a little bit of fear. Clearly it does whenever there's a case like that in a school, whether it's a student or a staff member. the result is still the same, that we have a number of people that we have to first examine if they've been exposed to the extent that would require them to go into something like quarantine or isolation, possibly seek a doctor's guidance to pursue their own health and safety as a result of exposure, or if they haven't been exposed and that the infectious period of the person who was in school and recognized wasn't possibly in school during their infectious time. So there's a number of factors that we like to take into account before we even start the process I'm about to describe for you. And it really does begin with confirming the type of exposure that actually happened. So that's always step number one for us, is confirming the type of exposure that happens. But once we do get that, and we find out that there was a positive case and that that person was in school, then we determine if they were in school first during an infectious period or not. And then we start researching all the people and the places in the campus that they've had contact with. The places are either professionally cleaned, depending on the timing of their last time that they were in those spaces, or they're cleaned in a similar professional way by the custodian staff who's been trained in a special COVID cleaning process. And then we start talking to all the individuals. And sometimes it's as simple as just letting those individuals know that they've had a contact with somebody who has tested positive, and then informing them how the Department of Health will continue with the process from that point on to give them good, clear medical guidance on how to fulfill their quarantine or possible isolation, and if they might need further care from a doctor or a hospital, if that was ever to be the case for them. Internally, there's a lot of other steps to that, clearly. I mean, protocols we use to notify the community, to notify the staff, to let the state offices know so that we can keep an accurate record in all the different websites now that are keeping counts of all of these things. There's a great deal of information that happens in that part of the process. And that's where these two young ladies really come into play. They essentially will move into the school for that day, and they work right alongside, elbow partner to the principal and the principal's leadership team at the school to manage the case response. And that's everything, including the research within the staff and the facilities to determine the level of exposure. And then I work directly with both of them to figure out what the most important steps are that we need to communicate out to the public, or that I might need to make sure I'm informing the Department of Health and the other state level offices of the DOE as to our whole plan and our whole procedure, because they provide us with a bunch of support people as well. So there's really I want to say there's about 10 people outside of the school that all get together on this COVID response team for us and flood the school with support. It really comes down to just making sure that everything is right at the fingertips of the principal and the staff and students of the school to ensure that they're going to be as safe as possible going through the whole situation. And then I'll leave it at that for right now and see if there's any questions you folks might have that I can either point to Marnie or Danielle to support with, or it might be a question that would be better suited for me to answer. And then let's just see where we go from there. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think I had a couple questions real quick, because on the prevention side, you talked about the six feet distance. We're getting questions pertaining to masking that's coming in on the feed now. What's the policy for masking for the students and the teachers for that matter?
Well, I'll give you a brief and really specific reference. The health and safety guidance manual that we have right now says that the masking is an expectation. It's not a voluntary or a subjective thing that a person gets to choose. There are certain conditions when wearing a mask, where not wearing a mask might be allowed. And this would be a great thing for Danielle. Would you like to talk a little bit about that? It's a perfect opportunity to see where the masking or not needing to wear a mask might be applied in a school setting.
Yeah, so masks need to be worn almost at all times during the school day. Students are allowed to take mask breaks. They need to be at least 6 feet away. That language has actually gotten more specific in the latest Health and Safety Handbook, version 11. It says mask breaks need to be taken outside now. Of course, during eating, during snack time, during cafeteria, they can take off the masks. Young kids, when they're learning like phonics type lessons, they are allowed to remove their masks as long as they're 6 feet apart. Some teachers are opting for like the clear shield during those lessons. And then I think also the only other exception is during elementary school recess and intense physical activity. But other than that, they need to have their masks on.
So for the most part, our kids in school are all wearing masks. They have some opportunities to have mask breaks, but because I know a lot of people are saying that what I'm reading anyway is that the schools are not requiring masks, and that in fact one of the questions was why are they exempt when the mandates require indoor mask wearing. So let's clear it up right now. They are required to wear a mask.
They absolutely are. Yeah, it's an expectation in the school setting. It's not a voluntary or optional thing. And honestly, there might be some truth to them not wearing a mask at different points, as Danielle has said. And there is one other situation where a child might not, or an adult might not wear a mask in the school setting, and that would be if wearing the mask prevented some other life preventing medical reason or medical condition. If the mask itself interferes with a life-sustaining condition that the person can't afford to wear the mask to interfere with it, then they would have a medical excuse from a physician that would allow them to not wear the mask and have some sort of alternative option presented to them. But for the most part, even those cases that I've been made aware of, if we give the surgical mask that's provided as PPE to the schools by the department, those are actually much more breathable than some of the really thick cloth masks we see that you can buy in the stores. Those make it sometimes very difficult to breathe. And so far, those who have complained of that, wearing the blue disposable one that we use, that's solved that problem. It tends to be a lot better. And for whatever it's worth, I would suggest that to everybody too. If you're one of those people like me that really doesn't prefer the heavy cloth mask, it's difficult to breathe through that. I wear the more medically offered temporary mask, that blue one with the little skinny white, elastic on it. That one works well for me.
And actually, they recommend that. That's actually safer than those cloth masks. So that's a good thing. And they're not expensive. Go on Amazon, you can get those boxes relatively cheap. So perfect. Charlie, you got any questions?
Yeah, I wanted to find out from the schools, with regards to airlines, they have done numerous studies, just tracking the spread, how it spreads within a fuselage of the plane. Has any studies been done in the schools as far as dynamics of spreads within a classroom, that should you have a spread, what direction will, say, droplets start to travel within the classroom? Will it funnel through a door? Will it go out through the window? Has any kind of studies like that been done at any of the campuses that right now?
That's a great question, Charlie. And I actually have questions about that myself, to be honest with you. I can say only that because of the amount of restriction we've placed on school campuses as it is, we really have not invited visitors or guests to the settings where students are receiving in-person learning. I don't know if we're quite at that place where we're ready to open that kind of public research-based type of work in a classroom quite yet. There's a lot of safety factors that would make me really nervous as the superintendent. And I know that while that might be happening in other parts of the country, I don't know personally of it happening anywhere in our state. And it certainly isn't something that I've been approving in the school systems quite yet. That doesn't mean that we're not getting a lot of guidance from different medical professionals. I get a lot of letters from groups of physicians and other people who have suggestions that are based on their knowledge, of various epidemiology and things like that are really related to the science of the spread. But I can't say with 100% certainty that that's happened in any Kauai classrooms.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
know that there has been some research on classroom, like how it spread. And so there's a huge section of recommendations for making sure that each classroom has proper ventilation. So they even talk about what direction the fan should be faced and all the windows and doors open. So I know a year ago we were talking about wanting AC in all of our classrooms. And now we're saying open everything up. So there's not, studies on our island, but that is a big recommendation here that everyone is very familiar with.
Okay. And when I heard you say at the beginning of your COVID response, when you do have one in class, is there any way of tracking? Because this is something that Mel and I have been been pounding for the last 9 months, and we've been bringing it up to um, all the experts, because it seems like the contact tracing program. It seems like in a school, I would think the contact tracing would be a lot more easier, because it's confined and it's trackable at that point. But is there any way of determining whether a spread, that when you do your contact trace, you go forward in your investigation or backwards, to see if a student brought it in, or if it was from, like, say, a teacher giving it to a student, or something along those lines? Because right now, uh, with travel being the way it is, well, it's closed down. But prior to it, the opening of the Trans-Pacific on October 15th, we had that problem with determining people getting infections on island. Was it being infected by travel related or by community spread? And when they can't determine one, the easiest thing was to just say it's community spread. So I think, like in a school, it would be just say, well, the student brought it. So do you folks are you target specific in your investigations, and you work it front and back, so many days forward, so many days back, to find out if there was an infection rate taking place and who was getting it? Do you folks do that?
That is another great question. And I can say absolutely yes, we do. I think there's two parts to this. The first part, I'll give you a general answer and talk about that process a little bit. And then I'm going to let Marnie talk a little bit. She just had two recent cases that she was the kind of co-pilot with a principal, and she can speak to a little bit of the specifics behind some of that internal contact tracing, is kind of how we three talk about it and how I talk about it with the principals. Well, the first part of this is I do want to make a formal recognition that official contact tracing is only done by the Department of Health, right? So they do all of that guidance, they do all that research, they go out into the community, into different families, they follow up on all the leads, they do all that legwork and phone calling to make sure that they get a thorough picture, like you're talking about, both in the past for a certain fixed number of days, and that's based on infection symptom disposition or positive test result if they're asymptomatic. And what we do in the DOE is we go back 48 hours from either a positive test result for an asymptomatic person. That means they're not coughing or they don't look sick, but we think they might have been exposed, and then they test. And if they test positive, even if they don't have symptoms, we go from that positive test date and we backwards map 48 hours, and that's the infectious period. And that's what the Department of Health guides us with. So that's where we contain all of our testing and all of our internal contact tracing. Marnie, maybe you could talk a little bit about the past two experiences you had and some of the steps you guys followed at the school level to make sure we gathered all the right information to share with the Department of Health.
Yeah, so basically once a child is either symptomatic or has a positive test, we go back the 2 days, we track where the student was for those past 2 days. Because we have been doing blended learning in most of the schools, it's like an A-B schedule. We'll go back the 2 days to find out when they were last on the campus, and then track all the activity, who was in the classroom for the 15 minutes or longer. And we'll go through and find all the names, and we'll give those names over to the Department of Health.
And then likewise, we do the same thing for all the spaces, right? There may be a limited number of places that the child was at. And typically what we'll find is it's usually like the classroom, some outdoor areas, which don't require any kind of special cleaning when they're outside, but it might be other areas like the dining room or the lunch line. And then that's the kind of the golden rule is depending on how open and how much ventilation there is in the space, it may be considered just sort of like a covered outdoor space if it's really wide open, and it has a slightly different standard of when they consider it to be an exposure that could create a close contact, right? It'd be like if you were in an outdoor pavilion at the beach with somebody 10 feet away from you at a table, that might not necessarily warrant any type of close contact. And likewise, it could be the same in a cafeteria dining room where all four walls or three of the walls of the dining room are wide open to the outside elements with no real, need for it's wide open ventilation. So that might be a little a more strict definition of how we determine whether something's a close contact in a setting like that. Whereas in a classroom, if you're in that classroom for 15 minutes throughout the course of the day, you're going to be notified. with a positive case, and hands down, no exceptions. That's one of those, hard, fast rules. It was a little bit less strict, and this is a good example of how the revisions to the health and safety guidance have yielded good things, I think. It used to be 15 minutes in a row at one time, no matter what, and that was it. Now they're saying if you're in that class for a cumulative total of 15 minutes throughout the course of a day at school, that's enough. And that kind of makes more sense. I know my common sense little trigger in my head seems to say that makes me feel better to say something like that and know that we're not missing somebody, right, when we're trying to do the research.
I have a question, and it's coming up as well. And we're getting a lot of specifics about specific schools. And I'm just going to say this, that if any of you viewers have specific concerns, you can send it over to me. If it's on another island, send it over to me. We'll make sure it gets to where it needs to go. If it's on Kauai, I'll make sure it gets to Mr. Zina. But I don't want to use this time to use specific examples from, otherwise we'll be here till 2 a.m. and that's my bedtime. But one of the questions though was, who has the authority to close a school? Is it the DOH or is it the DOE? At some point we've seen some schools with spreads that may have shut down. Who has that authority to shut down the school?
I think over the past couple of weeks, I must have answered that question more times than I'd care to count or share on the show. I can say that it's not that clearly black and white where it's only one person.
Okay.
Clearly, if there was a health-related emergency severe enough, the Department of Health could exercise some sort of authority. I don't know that it's ever happened in my lifetime, so I couldn't tell you a specific circumstance around it. But I can say that any, pandemic, epidemic-related thing where life is really at stake and there's a safety issue involving something that is only under the control of the Department of Health or some other state or federal agency, there could be an exercise of power at the right elected officials level to address any institution within the state or other states for that matter. So technically, I suppose, the Department of Health could have a hand in closing a school. But I think what your question really is about these COVID-related cases.
COVID-related.
Yeah, so for right now, if there is a COVID-related case in the school, I have the authority to work directly with the DOE state leadership to share with them the specific circumstances of a single school. And after some of the research that I do with the help of Marnie and Danielle, we actually determine between the three of us, the leadership team at a specific school, which includes the principal and often a few other members that can help them do some research at the school, right? And after that consultation, I make a suggestion to the state office about what areas of the school would require any type of closure. And the real reason to only do that would be for cleaning and sanitization that is required to make the place safe to reopen, clearly. So an example may be, and without getting into a specific case for a specific school, say a student or a teacher is found to be positive and they are in school when we discover this. And we discovered that the last day that they were on campus was the previous day, including that day when they are still on campus. The moment we recognize that there is a positive case like that, we isolate the area where that person is to determine the extent of exposure they have had from that day backwards the 48 hours prior to being contagious, right? So that infectious period is determined, and then we lock down all the areas that might be affected during that infectious period. And that might be a lot more than just 1 or 2 rooms, or it might only be 1 room. It really ranges, but we don't want to penalize the entire school and all the other healthy people who are attending and performing all the mitigating measures and being safe. And we don't want to prevent them from learning and accessing other needed things like the meal during the day at school when it's not necessary. But rest assured that it is a clear protocol when we do shut those areas down because we determine it through the contact tracing internally, right? So I would have the authority to close, make the recommendation to the state offices that these are the areas that we're closing, and they take that guidance from me, and officially I announce the closure here on our island. If it's not one of those other Department of Health related types of things that isn't specific to a school case.
Okay, a question I have, I guess this is directed to Marnie. And, it's always my it's always my wish never to back anyone in a corner. And I apologize if it's sounding like I am backing you in a corner. But this pertains to your 48-hour rule of going back in contact tracing. As you know, there's been a big discussion made with our the mayor's office and what protocols they would kind of like to see when someone lands on island, because we've been having a lot of post tests come about, and they've been finding people getting infected. So that's why they asked for like maybe 4 to 5 days with a second test, because we've had studies shown that within that period of time, it's the level of infection, the viral load starts building, right? You get that shedding period. I just wanted to ask why 48, why not longer? 48 hours.
That's just the protocol that people are in, what they're most in that infectious period, the 2 days before they start feeling the symptoms, that they can be spreading the germs, more virulent kind of germs for the 48 hours before the symptoms.
It's a CDC recommendation. The CDC has done the studies on the infectious period, and our Department of Health has adopted that.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
does it kind of what Dr. O'Carroll was when he did that paperwork to share the spread? It kind of sounds a little different, yeah.
Yeah, because the infectious period is obviously, we know that window is different for various different people, but I think when the CDC does the recommendations, I think they consider the environment at the schools. That again, this is provided that 6 feet apart and people are wearing masks and all of that. And I think if, for the most part, if we follow that, then I would assume that is why they believe 48 hours is sufficient. And the other thing too, practically, to try to go back with a student 36 or 48 hours, Charlie, I mean, it's kind of difficult. I mean, like, hey, where you was 4 days ago?
You asking a retired police officer a question. Of course, I go back that many hours.
I know, it's like, whoa. Another question that keeps popping up by several viewers is testing, and the fact, or the question is that, and this would be for the two nurses, I would suspect, but whoever, does the DOE test their employees? If so, how often? I just saw today that in the governor's, I think it was today, maybe it was this morning, or maybe it was yesterday. See, I can't remember what today or yesterday, but he was talking about the budget, and he was saying that, all the departments going to get cut. And I'm thinking, whoa, is testing part of the DOE's protocols for employees at any complex? Does the DOE provide testing for our employees?
No, we can't really enforce and tell people that they have to get a test done. I mean, HIPAA, medical rules and that kind of stuff, we can't force anybody to get tested.
Okay. So, but they don't offer it though. I mean, I'm talking about the state, the DOE doesn't offer testing, whether it's voluntary or mandatory. The teachers don't get tested.
Well, I can answer that, at least for Kauai. I know that there's been some discussion in other areas of the state to use schools as a site for surveillance or surge testing, but I don't think anyone has gone as far as to include it in a protocol for employees as a requirement. Okay. It hasn't quite gotten there yet. I suppose there may be some conversations around folks possibly doing a voluntary version of it, maybe like a quote screening process to help us identify some areas where we might want to include more surge testing. But that's just speculation at this point, and it wouldn't be part of any kind of formal requirement.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just asking the questions. I know that the Kauai anyway, they do the voluntary testing every Sunday. So teachers would be able to go and get a free test there if they chose to. So, the problem with this Facebook is I don't know if these questions are coming from Kauai, Maui, Big Island, because we got viewers from all islands.
Right.
I know I can answer for Kauai as far as Kauai's voluntary testing, which the county graciously puts out every Sunday. And anyone that's concerned, I would, if I worked in any kind of area like a school or a hospital or a hotel, I would go get my test just because, you know, it's because of curiosity.
Yeah, I think if you're asking if it's something that you know, we would support one way or the other, I see the value of the science behind this. That, I mean, clearly testing is linked to better control, right? So we want to have real responsible testing, and if that comes from a process that might be more voluntary for school staff, I would encourage it. I would
Oh,
think
yeah.
that if we could find a safe way to do that without violating anybody's like sort of contractual obligations in their workspace, and making sure that it wasn't something that was real invasive, or it absolutely had to maintain a sense of privacy and those things.
Mhm.
If we could do all of those things in a way that maybe we similarly manage like flu shots every year, I would think that we could probably figure something out, and it
Mhm.
is worth considering and probably looking into a little bit more. And that would be a conversation with me and possibly Dr. Behrman from the Department of Health, and maybe a few community organizations that could support us in an effort like that.
I think the problem has always been for the state anyway is the availability of tests. That in fact we just don't have that amount of tests to be testing on. That wouldn't even be a surveillance testing. It would be kind of like diagnostic testing, and we just don't have the resources. I think it's always been that. But yeah, I would love to see that available anyway for all employees, really.
I'd be open to the conversation for sure.
You know, for our two nurses, what's, if there are no cases, and either one of you can answer this, what's the amount of time spent per campus? Is there any like scheduling, or you folks, I mean, how do you run that, your program?
Like, how do we spend time at each school?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of our time is spent on the computer now, but we do go out. Marnie's might be a little bit different, so I'll just explain for myself. I have home base at Wilcox Elementary School. Marnie's at Waimea Canyon Middle School. So that's like where our office is based. But then we do go to other schools to visit the health rooms, respond to these cases. We do contingency plans for our like medically fragile students, but no exact schedule. It kind of just when things pop up. We do try to make it around to the schools at least once a month, but no real schedule. Do you have anything to add, Marnie?
Yeah, you know, I've been going around to the different schools. We'll have like a COVID response team at each school, and we'll sit down and discuss what the changes were inside the safety handbook, the health and safety handbook, the return to learn for the schools. So we'll discuss that. With each school, we're also putting together either, it's called like a waiting room or an isolation room, so that if a student is not feeling well and is having any of those kind of COVID symptoms, where they can go over to that area, and the health aide will assess them in that room. So I helped with all the schools with setting up a room for them, for the students to go over to get, and then the parents will pick them up from that specific room, as opposed to if somebody has COVID symptoms and comes into the front office. And then if they do end up with COVID and having to close the office area because they were in that area for more than 15 minutes. So setting up a space for the student to be in a waiting room area outside of the office.
You know, I kind of would like to see, this is just an add-in, maybe I'll address this to Mr. Zina, is it's always interesting when your campuses have like tabletop drills or even discussions to discuss this, because you know, I used to have the contract at the state harbors and everything was Homeland Security. Well, we don't have terrorists attacking us all the time, but they expect us to do tabletop drills to be prepared should something happen. And I think that would be excellent for your schools, because I remember, Marnie, you said it's hard teaching, you know, especially when you're doing online, as opposed, because as a CPR instructor myself, I've had to adapt to online teaching, which you don't have that interaction that you normally would see. But I think, you know, the first thing you ask your students, if you only certify them every 2 years, is when have you used it last? Because we didn't. And so guaranteed they forgot a lot of stuff. So I think, you know, with this, I call it a COVID expansion. You know, you might have a down period for a good length of time, which means, hey, things are going good. But nevertheless, don't put your guard down and just keep on training. Should something pop up, you'll be ready. You'll be ready. Do you anticipate doing anything like that, Paul?
Well, I think that it's funny because that training, it becomes super vital when you have down periods, like you said. I think we'd all love to have a down period. We're not in the mode where we have to worry about a down period at this point. I mean, our cases are connected by such short periods of time, and we're very lucky to only have a very small number of them. But still, having a positive case in one school creates a debrief opportunity for all the other schools, and that's what we do. So we round table all the principals together, and I go over the response protocol that we went through at that school with those principals, and I let the principal who had gone through that whole response protocol do a lot of the debriefing with the other principals. So they don't hear my voice a lot during that meeting. It's a time when the principal who had to experience the response can talk about what the whole process entailed and how the protocols were in place, and then they answer questions from the other principals, and it creates that sort of scenario training that you're talking about. And we're really fortunate that because of the spacing of these events where we have incidents of positive cases being identified, they're within a couple of weeks of each other. So and we essentially have 2 major principal meetings a month, but we may call an emergency meeting for something like that.
Okay, thank you.
The COVID response teams, I think Marnie or Danielle, one of you brought that up, at each school. So there is a response team located at each school. What does that entail, and how does that work? Let's just hypothetically give us maybe like a hypothetical situation. What happens if I heard you say they took them to an isolation room, but who's on this COVID response team, and how does that work?
Okay, so a lot of them have the principal will be on the COVID response team, usually the head custodian, so that we have somebody that can move around, has the keys to the different places, and can lock things that need to be cleaned appropriately. The health aide, the principal, a teacher, and the custodian are usually on the response team. And those are the ones that I go around every month. We try to have a meeting at each school to discuss what's been going on with the changes.
And so, like, is there a health nurse or health aide at every school that would know exactly what to do should a child get sick?
Yeah, so there's 2 different, so usually when we respond to a positive COVID case, it's someone who's not currently on campus. It's not somebody who's going to the health room ill, right? So we found out after they've been tested, right? So they're usually at home. Sometimes that's not been the case, but so the health aide is really dealing with the ill student in school. So they know all of the protocols on how to don their PPE, put the student in the isolation room when they need to go home, how they can come back to school. And then the other side of it is the COVID response team, who is making sure that all the protocols in our version 11 now of the health and safety guidebook, those are all being followed, and they're up to date. And then when there is a positive case, that COVID response team is all sitting together, going through that whole process. It's a days-long process to respond to one case.
So your custodians, I know I was talking to a woman that had called me from Kauai, and she was on that COVID response team as a custodian, and she was explaining to me what they have to do. I mean, not even when someone gets sick, just their normal routine disinfection of the school. I got to tell you, I was very happy, comfortable, because I hear so much, but this came from a woman that is doing it every day. And I was quite impressed with what she was telling me she had to do they have an hourly schedule and a day, everything's that's all spelled out for them. And it's quite difficult. It's a lot of work. And I hope that people understand that this whole COVID response team doesn't only happen when someone is sick. It's a daily, that plan contains daily activities for the team. maybe somebody can expand on that. I was quite blown away actually. That wow, it's quite impressive actually.
You know, Mel, I'd love to add a little comment to that. I like to talk to the custodial teams and the principals and tell them that exactly what you just said. COVID response doesn't start when you get a positive case. It's something that you do on a daily basis to keep your facility clean and sanitized. And our custodians around this island really rock. I mean, God bless them. They work to the bone and will often come in at the wee hours of a night to do a response to something that we very often find out during non-school hours, right? And just so that school can be opened as usual, they would come in on a Sunday night, a Saturday morning, late on a Saturday evening, you name it, they come in at every hour. And because they're so committed to the staff and the students, and it just goes to show that these teams at the schools, it's not just lip service they're providing to a plan. They live it. They really do. And when there's ever any question at all, even if it's not officially required response or cleaning and sanitization that's required, they go in and do it anyways. It's just amazing how they step up. I'm constantly blown away by the commitment of our staff, especially that group of people. They work like crazy, and I'm so impressed with them. And it does happen every day. It's not just when we have a positive case. And that's what allows us to be so thorough when we do get a positive case. Mm-hmm. Very often, you may have heard some of these public announcements from schools where we have had positive cases, and the language is always including something like the school has been cleaned and sanitized already. That's not a mistake. That's because they're doing this stuff ahead of time. They do it every day, whether it's positive or not. They clean it like it might be a positive case, so they never have to worry. And that allows us to remain open and keep the kids in place. And one of the key reasons why I feel really confident about coming back to more blended learning for all the students all the way through grade 12.
So what does it look like going into, and again, we all hear about the vaccine and we all hear about all these things, but let's just say the trend that we're currently on the direction we're headed, as far as, when will our kids when we'll be back to normal? I mean, a lot has to do with the virus, I guess, because it's not a normal virus, but I'm assuming that at some point, we'll be able to get our kids back in school on a full-time basis. Is there any, I know this is a horrible question, but is there any kind of estimate?
I'll try to save our nurses from this one, because this one's got like a loaded gun behind it. I will go out on a limb and just say this. I haven't made my personal feelings on this a secret. I really haven't kept them that way. I really want our kids back in school. I want them back in school like normal, like you say, badly. But I also know I'm not a medical professional, and nor is the school staffed with a bunch of like epidemiologists who are experts on this. So we really do have to kind of give in to the CDC guidelines on this. The one thing that I think we can say that might be unique across different school districts, depending on where you look, in or out of our state, is that by the time a school gets to the point where you can keep the students physically present on campus, and the only limit you have is social distancing, then that's where you're stuck. You stay there until social distancing is no longer needed, or they go to a smaller number for some reason. And I honestly don't see the CDC doing something like that until they have a really good grip on like vaccines and immunity and things like that. Now, again, I'm not a epidemiologist. I'm not the expert in this, but it just does seem like the CDC would be like every other organization. They would want a medical assurance that getting something like COVID is not a death threat or is not a death sentence. The time we manage it and it becomes safe and it turns into something like the flu, which we still get plenty of people who catch the flu, and there are actually people who die from it. But there is a inoculation, there is a vaccine, and it does, for the majority of the public, prevent them from experiencing life-endangering circumstances because of the illness. When I'm convinced that our students and our staff in the schools are not facing a life-endangering situation because of the disease, I'll feel a whole lot better about bringing everybody back every day, all day. And I think until such a time, we're really sort of at the mercy of that. And I hope that's something that just has that common sense sort of factor for most people, that it's not something that we're trying to promote or say everybody should get the vaccine, because I know there's some very personal, strong views about that as well. What I am saying is that historically, a vaccine has led to a very large sense of herd immunity for a community. where if a lot of people do get it and it does result in immunity to the disease, that helps us worry a whole lot less about the spread within our community. And then there'll be a time when those experts that are operating in the CDC can tell us, hey, guess what? Social distancing is no longer a requirement. And these are the conditions that you met that make that possible. I'm so looking forward to that. So until then, we're working really hard to make sure the schools are in a place where these blended models, we get as many kids back as in person as we can with the 6-foot distancing. And then that should be our only limit from here out, unless we just get hammered by some terrible downturn in the pandemic, which I'm really knocking on wood and crossing my fingers, making sure we don't do that. Do everything I can with the mayor and his team to ensure that doesn't happen.
You know,
Marnie, Marnie, I want to hear a little bit from the nurses. I mean, and you don't have to if you don't want to. I know it's a loaded question, but I'm just curious because there's always been that the balance, the health and safety, the medical side, and you know, everyone has their own guidelines. But what's your take on that as far as getting the kids back in school? When is the right time?
I think that's a good question. Right now is not probably the right time yet. It's, you know, I think it is, we're ready for more of a blended learning for the kids to come back in. I feel safe since I have a daughter in the DOE to go back to school. I would feel comfortable with her going back into that blended model. But yeah, I don't know. I know she really misses her friends and seeing people and that kind of stuff. And it breaks my heart to tell her that, you know, you only get to see half of your friends because it's an A-B schedule for her school. But yeah, I don't know. I just like the fact that I feel reassured with all the cleaning and the protocols in place that the kids can start going back to school soon.
Danielle?
I liked it when you asked, like, when do we go back to normal? And I think, Mr. Zina, the main thing is the 6-foot distancing, right? So as long as the CDC is recommending that, that's what limits us. But then I think somebody said it, I don't know if this was in our CDC visit, but they were talking about how we're going to be taking away these mitigating strategies in layers, right? So we have the vaccine's going to be coming out and we're still going to have the 6-foot distancing. We're still going to have the masks. The masks will probably be the last to go. So that's not normal, but I think that we could start bringing our kids back more and more frequently, right? But we might have masks into 2022. I don't know. My daughter's a kindergartner. I don't know if a kindergarten class is ever going to be the same again, where they're going to stations and playing at the kitchen and the dollhouse and sharing Legos and holding hands. So I think there's different layers of normalcy. And I think the priority is getting as many kids back to school as soon as possible when we can safely do that.
Charlie?
well, it's tough all around because when you're dealing with something you can't see, that's what makes it tough. I know at one point, several years back, everything was train the schools for an active shooter, train the schools for an active shooter. Why? Because you're going to see somebody coming with a gun. It was much easier. When you're dealing with this virus, you can get hit first. And so it's like a sonic boom going to come and then you do the reaction. It's more reactive. So the proactive part, you're trying your best to set up that so-called dragnet to build up that geofence so you don't let it come in. I think a lot of it is all dependent, especially with the kids being out learning at home. If some of them do decide to take trips with their parents, you know, it's understandable they're going to want to do that. But I think what the government needs to do is to help everybody, just keep on letting us know where the hotspots are. Because, you know, if it says, hey, I'm going to take my kid to go Disneyland, well, you're just walking right into an hornet's nest. So what are the percentages that you may or may not come back with the virus? See, those are the kind of things that we got to start looking at. You know, we kind of laugh a lot of times because they said, well, you know, we took trips and for years I see Japanese always wearing masks and I thought it was crazy. But, you know, they knew something back then, 10, 15, 20 years ago that we never know. And that was masks save lives. So that's why I said, you know what? Even if they do away with the mask, I still gonna wear a mask. Maybe by then my teeth gonna fall out, so the mask gonna cover that. So anyway, but then I still gonna use a mask, you know. But I think it's a rough road ahead for our kids, and I think a lot of the examples are the teachers. But I think, you know, who needs to be trained also is the parents. You gotta start training them at home, because I can almost see, you talk about the CDC, you know, it's a recommendation. It's not the absolute. That's why I always said, how come we don't exceed the CDC guidelines sometimes? Because I think sometimes they just come in under the wire, and I want more. I want to see more done. And where I see the complacency is when we start taking away, and like you said, Danielle, in layers, when things got taken away, people get this false sense of security, like, hey, the vaccine is here, we good already, let's go. You know, I was sharing with Mel earlier. I talked to someone from the government, because we are going to bring on a vaccine expert from South Korea. You know, the question I pose is, why is it that out of the top three, why does one have to have it frozen at minus 100 degrees Celsius? Then if you look at the background of it, there's only like a 5-day shelf life once it's open. So if there's a 5-day shelf life and you got to take the second shot in 28 days, that one went out the window. The only one that looks like it's going to be promising, but it hasn't gotten its, hasn't applied for the EUA, is that AstraZeneca. You know, the last one where it can be stored at room temperature. So, you know, there's a lot of these things that's going to come about, but I think it's going to affect the schools in many different ways, because we're talking about vaccines. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'm not a.
Well, I know one thing, vaccine or no vaccine, I mean, the virus is here. We're going to have to learn to coexist with the vaccine. I mean, with the virus. Yeah. So, you know, yeah. Our focus was always to try to get the kids back in school. I mean, we all want to see that. And as long as it's safe. I know, like I said, a lot of these comments get some angry people out there. And I'm going to repeat it again. If your school or your kid's school is not doing what they're supposed to, let us know so we can channel that to the right people. I can only tell you what I know for Kauai anyway, and it was pretty impressive what I heard, and thank you guys. But one more last question, Doc. I mean, Doc, we get so many doctors on the show. Golly, we get 2 nurses, but one of the questions that keep coming up as far as notifications when you have an infection or you have someone test positive, is the entire staff of the school or anyone that obviously is a possible contact is notified, right? At that specific school.
Yeah, the short answer is yeah. Yes, but obviously there's a lot of privacy laws around, you know, sharing names and things like that. But we've actually made it a practice on Kauai that the written notification goes out to the whole school community. So there's an order that we notify everybody for health and safety purposes, right? Like the school response, obviously the staff needs to find out first, so you can take immediate action on keeping the facility safe and getting it cleaned properly. And then once the staff's all notified of the general nature of the case and the parts of the school that are affected, even the staff does not get a personal name. They don't they know it's either an employee or a student, and that's it.
Okay.
Then the rest of it is we do a written notification to the school community.
Okay.
Can I ask a big favor? And you know, we've had this many times. You know, Mel and I would be having the show, and then somebody will message us and says, "Hey," and they'll text us that notice that goes from the DOE about, you know, there's been a reported case, and that, you know, you're working on it and all that. But maybe messaging to everyone that, you know, when you get a case, it's already happened. Because a lot of times I see the anger as is, you know, a lot of times people think of like, why couldn't the school have done more? Well, you know, you won't know until it happens. I mean, that's the unfortunate part when it happens in the school. You know, it's not like the school is saying, yeah, you know, we're welcoming it. You folks aren't doing that. You know, if a child is infected or a teacher is infected, I think the only time I saw it is in Honolulu. when you have, like say, I reported a teacher may have been infected or knowingly infected, but still went to school because the symptoms wasn't great, and then they say, look, she was infected, went to school. It's like those two people knowing they're infected, they jumped on a plane anyway to come to Kauai. It's stuff like that. Then yeah, people get mad. But for the most part, I hope maybe you can put out a message that when we do get something like this, it's probably because it's already happened, and that's the reason why we're responding. And I want people to know that.
No, for what it's worth, Charlie and Mel, and everybody who's watching, I can say every single one of the cases that came up in a school wasn't related to school-related spread. It happened because of something out in the community or travel, and it stopped when it reached the school. So the school wasn't a place that's causing this. And I want to reiterate what I said at the very beginning about the praise that our custodians and the school staff really deserve. They have employed all of the mitigating measures without flaw, every single campus. I literally walk every single campus every single quarter just to inspect and just to look at all these things. And I'm seeing the same kinds of practices at every single one of the schools. And they're doing things that are keeping their kids safe and their staff safe. I know it's not a source of community spread, because if it was, we would be hearing about cases that got spread because of what's happening in schools, instead of spread stopping when it reaches a school, which is what's happening now.
Good
So
point.
I thank you for Charlie for mentioning that, because it really isn't something that's happening, at least on Kauai. I can't speak to every single school everywhere, but I can say Kauai is Kauai. We are Kauai strong, and the staff in the schools take that very seriously when it comes to the health and safety of our kids.
Well, I will nominate you to go see the governor and the lieutenant governor and let them know that the spread stops at schools, and you folks should teach the state how to stop the spread. That's what schools are for. You learn, right? So you stop it at the school. That's good. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you said that, Mr. Zina, because we've Charlie and I can be in the middle of a show, and we'll get a message of
Hysteria.
an actual screenshot of a letter that someone just got in the email. But and again, this goes to exactly what you were saying, that the protocols in the schools on Kauai. You're right. We have had no spread within the schools, unlike the jails or wherever else may be blowing up. So yeah, I mean, that's a testament to what's been going on at the schools on Kauai anyway. That in fact, I like the way you said it. It stops at the school, and I think that's pretty cool. We are at the top of the hour. I did want to give Danielle, Marnie, and then Paul. You guys want any closing comments for our viewers? Yeah, talk about anything. Wearing a mask or social distance.
I'll just share a resource. I can't see what all the questions are right now, and if people had some questions about what was happening at their own school campus. But I do recommend, so as a state, we do follow the health and safety handbook. So you heard me mention that several times. We're on version 11 that can be found on the State of Hawaii DOE website. And then if you also had other questions where you wanted to talk to someone like Marnie and I, so our program is statewide, and there's a health hotline that you can call to ask any of these questions. Someone's always manning it from 8 to 3 on school days. I don't have the number up here. Again, it's on the DOE website. So I hope that can help maybe answer some further questions after this show.
Thank you. Thank you. Marnie?
I think for me, we don't give out the student's name. And I know some parents get upset because they really want to find out who it was. I think that student who is COVID positive has a lot on their plate already, just trying to get healthy. And they don't need to live with the stigma that they were the COVID kid or any kind of bullying or name calling and that kind of stuff. So I really hope that, parents will realize what this child has to go through and not demand a name, because I know they've really been asking who it was. And yeah, the family has enough to deal with already.
I agree. Mr. Zina.
I got one last resource for everybody. So hot off the presses, if you had a chance to watch the mayor's update today, you'll have heard some of the things I shared about the third quarter opening plans that we had and that I explained on the show. But my official complex area office memo is posted on the bit.ly for the Kauai Public Schools launch page. So if you go to bit.ly/Kauai Public Schools, all lowercase letters, you'll find a launch page to every single one of the public schools on Kauai. And the launch page this Friday will have the school-specific plans for the third quarter model that they're using. And most of you may have been communicating with your schools already about your children's particular needs for whether they want to attend in person or not. And again, like I mentioned, my official memo regarding that and your options for the third quarter is posted on that same page. So if you go to that page and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a health and safety sort of wellness check reminder for families. You'll see my memo for the official start of the third quarter. And then you'll see big logos for each of the schools. And you can just click on whichever school is for your child. And on this Friday, that will be updated with the third quarter plans. And all the schools will update on Friday at the same time. So just check that site regularly and look for the updates. There's even a link to the DOE website that Danielle was mentioning so that you can go find the COVID updates on the department's website. And it's just a great resource. It is our one-stop shop for everything COVID related.
All righty. You know if that's available for the other islands as well, or is that just for Kauai right now?
Well, like I said, I can't speak to what's going on in every other complex area, but we created it for Kauai because we know you folks need that information. And it's easier to remember that one little website than it is to try to remember every single school.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Charlie, closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to our three guests tonight. Appreciate it very, very much for coming on, sharing their backgrounds as well as, some of their thoughts in dealing with this pandemic. For our viewers out there, again, it's never an easy topic to talk about. Some of us have lost loved ones to this deadly virus. It is deadly, but it doesn't have to be if we just do the right things, and that is don't be complacent, wear your mask, practice your social distancing. I know there's been a big scuttlebutt as what is 6 feet. Who knows what 6 feet is? The way I look at it is the further away you can stay, the better you are. Okay, if you're not within spitting distance, you'll be perfectly fine. So just stay away from the other people. Use common sense, but most of all, our kids need to get back to school. You heard it from the professionals here, and we've all seen it. But again, there's a right way of doing it and a wrong way. We want to put our kids into a safe environment, not an environment that they have to fight for their lives. So I hope everything works out in the long run. Mel?
Right on. Well, Paul, Marnie, and Danielle, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate all that you guys are doing. I know, like I said, a lot of people on the other islands are frustrated. Again, just shoot us a message. We'll get it to where it needs to go. We just wanted to bring out some information. I wish I could do this for every island, but we can't. So we got Kauai, and appreciate what you guys are doing. Like I said, the COVID response team, I learned a little bit talking to one custodian. I was very impressed. Things are happening. Things are getting done. And that is why Kauai is doing really well at the school level. So thank you all for sharing tonight with us. We appreciate you guys. You guys all stay safe. Tomorrow we'll be back at 7 o'clock. Everyone, tune in again. And Wednesday we got Dr. DeWorkin and Dr. D. Roth. It'll be fun. We'll be talking about COVID and a lot of things that many of you are interested in. So, and then don't forget on the 15th, Dr. Jerome Kim from South Korea International Vaccine Institute. He'll be here to give us all the updates we need to know about the vaccine. So, all right, you guys take care. God bless you guys. Stay safe. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Aloha.